The first victim is a fish. Subject 12, simpatico. This is a state of profound interpersonal resonance that transcends simple liking or shared interests. Simpatico is an immediate, often wordless alignment of temperaments, a harmonious vibration between two psyches. It is the feeling of being on the same emotional and intellectual wavelength, where communication becomes effortless and understanding is deep and intuitive. When two people are simpatico, conversation flows without the usual friction of misunderstanding. Jokes are grasped at the slightest hint. Silences are comfortable and shared rather than awkward. There is a sense that the other person not only hears your words but perceives the unspoken context and emotion behind them. It is akin to finding a person who speaks your native and previously unique emotional language. This connection often feels fated or preordained, as if recognizing a missing part of one's own self in another. It can occur in friendship, in romance, or in a professional collaboration. It is the foundation of the most productive and creative partnerships where ideas are built cooperatively, each person's contribution naturally complementing the others. Simpatico is rare. It is more than compatibility, which is a checklist of shared traits. It is a chemical, almost alchemical reaction between two inner worlds. It provides a profound sense of validation and belonging, a comforting proof that one is not entirely alone in their particular way of perceiving and moving through the world. Subject 13, psychic poison. This is any idea, belief, memory, or piece of information that once introduced into the psyche begins a process of irreversible corruption, decay, and paralysis. Unlike a simple negative thought, a psychic poison is a self replicating, metastasizing narrative that systematically attacks the foundations of a person's well being, their self worth, their trust in others, or their hope for the future. A classic example is the seed of pathological jealousy. A single unverified suspicion enters the mind. Instead of being dismissed, it takes root. It then begins to reinterpret all neutral data as confirmation. A partner's late night at work becomes evidence of an affair. A casual laugh with a stranger becomes a sign of secret intimacy. The poison spreads, distorting all perception and eventually destroying the relationship it feared losing. Another psychic poison is the belief in one's own fundamental inadequacy. The single idea can poison every achievement, a fluke, every relationship. They will soon discover the real me, and every opportunity. I don't deserve this. It is a toxin that turns nourishment into sickness. Psychic poisons are notoriously difficult to antidote because they compromise the very organ, the mind, that is meant to administer the cure. They create a closed, self justifying logical system. Treatment often requires a radical intervention from outside the system, a therapist, a trusted friend, or a transformative experience that provides a new, untainted source of data from which to rebuild a healthier internal narrative. Subject 14, the true uses of deception. Deception is universally condemned as a moral failing, yet this view ignores its complex and often necessary role in the ecosystem of human interaction. The true uses of deception extend far beyond malevolent manipulation. It is a multifaceted tool for survival, social cohesion, and even compassion. Lubrication of society. The white lie is the bedrock of daily civility. I'm fine, thank you. It's great to see you. What a lovely gift. These are small deceptions that prevent the constant abrasive friction of unvarnished truth, allowing social machinery to run smoothly. Self preservation. Throughout history, dissidents, the persecuted, and the powerless have used deception as a shield. Hiding one's true beliefs or identity from a hostile authority is not cowardice, it is a strategic necessity for survival. The protection of others. Deception can be an act of mercy. Shielding a child from a horrifying truth or a dying person from a hopeless prognosis is a deception motivated by a desire to preserve peace and prevent suffering. The truth in these instances is a weapon with no constructive purpose. The cultivation of mystery and allure. In romance and artistry, a degree of strategic concealment creates intrigue. Revealing everything all at once is often uninteresting. The slow curated reveal, a form of controlled deception, is what builds attraction and engagement. Strategic advantage. In competition, from business to warfare, deception is an essential element. Feints, misdirection, and concealment of one's true capabilities or intentions are the moves that win games and conflicts. The ethical weight of deception, therefore, lies not in the act itself, but in its purpose and consequences. Is it used to protect or to destroy, to build up or to tear down, to spare pain or to inflict it? The true uses of deception reveal it as a neutral tool whose moral character is defined entirely by the hand that wields it. Subject 15. Amused yet puzzled. This describes a specific and sophisticated cognitive emotional state, typically experienced by a perceptive observer confronted with behavior that is simultaneously incongruous and entertaining. It is the feeling of being intellectually disoriented while being aesthetically pleased. The amused component stems from the spectacle of the absurd, the ironic, or the quaint. One finds a genuine, detached entertainment in the observed phenomenon. The puzzle component, however, is an active intellectual engagement. The observer is trying to reconcile the spectacle with their understanding of logic, motivation, or common sense, and failing to do so. One might feel this way when watching a deeply serious artist explain their baffling work with utter solemnity. English. It is my first language. The commitment is amusing. The lack of self-awareness is puzzling, or when listening to a conspiracy theorist weave an elaborate, internally consistent narrative from unrelated threads. The creativity is amusing, the departure from reality is puzzling. This state is a mark of a mind that has moved beyond simple judgment. It does not dismiss the subject with contempt, nor does it accept it with credulity. It holds the contradiction in a state of suspension, appreciating the humor while actively probing the mystery. It is the quintessential posture of the anthropologist, the satirist, and the wise grandparents, observing the strange rituals of the world with a warm smile and a curious, questioning mind. Subject 16. Bandy platitudes. To bandy platitudes is to engage in a ritualistic exchange of prepackaged, socially sanctioned phrases that have been emptied of specific meaning through overuse. It is the conversational equivalent of using counterfeit currency. It gives the appearance of transactional exchange without the transfer of any real value. Platitudes such as everything happens for a reason, it is what it is, follow your dreams, or time heals all wounds are linguistic tokens. They are not meant to convey deep thought or genuine empathy. Their primary function is to signal group membership, terminate difficult conversations, and fill awkward silences with a harmless, reassuring noise. The person who bandies platitudes is often either intellectually lazy, emotionally avoidant, or socially anxious. They lack the energy, courage, or vocabulary to engage with the complex, messy truth of a situation. Offering a platitude in the face of another's grief or struggle is to build a weak verbal levee against the flood of their authentic emotion. It is a way of saying, I acknowledge your pain, but please do not require me to wade into it with you. While the intent is not always malicious, the effect is almost always one of subtle invalidation. It reduces a unique personal struggle to a generic solved problem. The conversation is steered away from the rocky shores of raw, complicated feeling and back into the safe, dull harbor of cliché. To refuse to bandy platitudes is to demand a more authentic and therefore more risky form of communication. Subject 17. Sex habits. This concept moves beyond the simple cataloging of physical acts and preferences to examine the deeply ingrained, often unconscious patterns of behavior, expectation, and emotional response that constitute an individual's sexual script. These habits are the architecture of one's erotic life, built from a blueprint drawn by biology, early experiences, cultural messaging, and psychological needs. Sex habits include the unspoken rules one carries, whether sex is primarily an act of passion, of intimacy, of conquest, or of obligation. They encompass the rituals of initiation, how one signals desire, and how one expects to be pursued or to pursue. They include the preferred emotional temperature, tender, aggressive, detached, worshipful. These habits are often invisible to the individual, simply feeling like the way things are. They become apparent and often a source of conflict in a partnership where two different, unexamined sexual scripts collide. One person's habit of postcoital distance may be another's profound need for affectionate connection. One script for dirty talk may be another's trigger for shame. Examining one's own sex habits is a profound act of self-knowledge. It requires asking, why do I prefer this? What need does this act fulfill? Is this a chosen preference or a compulsive pattern? Is this habit connecting me to my partner, or is it a solitary performance? Changing a sex habit is one of the most difficult personal adjustments, as it involves rewiring not just behavior, but deep-seated emotional and psychological pathways linked to vulnerability, power, and self-worth. Subject 18. Extended influences. This concept challenges the simplistic model of direct cause and effect, proposing that the most significant forces shaping an individual's life and character are often indirect, distant in time, and seemingly unrelated to the present outcome. It is the acknowledgement of the long, invisible threads connecting past events, minor encounters, and forgotten ideas to our current selves. An extended influence is not your teacher who taught you a specific fact, but the teacher whose offhand comment about your potential, made when you were 10, became a silent mantra that drove you for decades. It is not the book you read, but the philosophical concept from that book which lay dormant for years before suddenly reorganizing your entire worldview during a crisis. It is the childhood friend's parent whom you barely knew, whose failed marriage subconsciously shaped your own fears about commitment. It is a piece of music heard on the radio during a long forgotten summer afternoon that now, when heard again, can evoke the entire emotional landscape of that time, influencing your mood and decisions in the present. To trace one's extended influences is to attempt to map one's own psychic genealogy. It is to look for the author of one's inner voice, the origin of one's deepest fears, and the source of one's most resilient strengths. It reveals that we are not self contained units, but living repositories carrying within us the echoes of countless past moments and people, all of which continue to exert a silent, persistent pressure on the person we are still becoming. Subject 19. Cries of adulation. These are the vocalized expressions of mass approval, worship, and praise directed at a figure, be they a leader, a celebrity, an artist, or an icon. The cries are significant for their collective, often frenzied and ritualistic nature. They are not measured applause, but an emotional surrender to the magnetism of the figure. The cries of adulation serve multiple functions. For the crowd, they are a form of ecstatic release, a merging of individual identity into the powerful, unified body of the mass. It is a transcendent feeling to shout one's approval in unison with thousands of others. For the figure receiving the adulation is the ultimate confirmation of their power and status. It is an addictive nectar. It is an addictive nectar, the sound of their own myth made audible. However, these cries are inherently fickle and nonspecific. They are not a thoughtful engagement with the figure's ideas or work. They are a reaction to the image of the figure. The cries are the same for a revolutionary leader as they are for a pop star because the psychological mechanism in the crowd is the same. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. The figure addicted to the sound begins to shape their persona and action specifically to elicit these cries, often abandoning substance for spectacle. The crowd, in turn, demands ever greater displays to fuel their ecstasy. The cries of adulation, therefore, while sounding like love, are often the prelude to a devouring. They build the pedestal from which the figure will almost certainly eventually fall.